All right, hello, welcome. Hi, Amanda. We're so excited to hear from you. We're so glad. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for coming out this evening, and welcome to our folks who are available on Zoom. We're so glad you were able to join us as well. My name is Megan Lister. I am the Assistant Director in the Wordle Center for Leadership and also the Co-Director of the Collaborative Innovation Concentration. And this talk this evening is the second in a series of the Collaborative Innovation Speaker Series, which is tied to the Collaborative Innovation Gateway. I'm going to see how many times I can say collaborative innovation in a very short intro. So the Gateway course is the introduction to the concentration, but also is open to any student to take who's interested in learning how to work effectively with other people to make things different in the world. And we are so excited to welcome Amanda here this evening to talk about their work. And we couldn't have done it without our two co-sponsors, the Design Thinking Initiative and also Disorganizing. And I am very, very thrilled to hand it over to Ariel to introduce Amanda. Thanks, Ariel.
Thank you so much. My name is Ariel. I'm a junior and I work at the Design Thinking Initiative, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Disorganizing, which is Smith's Disabled Student Group. I have the honor of introducing Amanda Simons, who I had the pleasure of meeting over the summer at a conference at USC for Makerspaces. Amanda N. Simons, she, is an artist, writer, educator, and safety advocate whose interdisciplinary practice explores the intersections of queer identity and experience-based learning. For the last decade, Amanda has taught folks age 5 to 85 how to use dangerous tools and make interesting things safely, both physically and emotionally. This work has been focused on the LGBTQIA+ community, neurodivergent students, folks with physical differences, English language learners, and underserved populations pursuing skills in typically exclusive fields like woodworking and metalworking. Amanda holds dual degrees in English and painting from the University of Michigan Flint, as well as dual advanced degrees in interdisciplinary studio art and visual and critical studies from California College of the Arts. Amanda has taught at San Francisco State University, San Francisco Art Institute, California College of the Arts, Girls Garage, Tinkering School, San Francisco and San Rafael, Brightworks School, Mott Community College, University of Michigan Flint, Asheville Buncombe Technical College, and University of North Carolina, Asheville. Amanda is currently an instructor, curriculum developer, and coordinator of University of North Carolina, Asheville's STEAM Studios Community Outreach Program, and leader in the program's initiative to expand the curricula to adult learners, elementary-age humans, and folks with physical and neurological differences. Thank you.
I'm going to take a drink of water first. I just want to thank Smith College, and I also want to thank DTI and Disorganizing, specifically Emily, Kathy, Ariel, and Megan. These folks are enacting the very changes I'm about to talk about, and they're already creating safe spaces in higher education for folks who look, think, and feel differently. As a neurodivergent queer person, I grew up not understanding where my future was going to take me. It's an absolute honor to be standing here talking to the Smith College community. So thank you for hosting me. A few housekeeping things. You can record, you can take notes, you can take photos. I'm here to share information. I'm here to share information that I want to be taken outside of this room. I ask that you please give me credit for these ideas. Tag me on social media if you post to social media. For anyone who needs to move or stretch or fidget or water break or take a bathroom break while I'm speaking, you're not going to distract me. I'm not going to think it's rude. I want you to self-care. I'm about to talk for about 50 minutes. I'm open to questions at the end, so please ask me all the things. Thumbs up? Great, thanks. I'm excited for this journey we're about to go on. So I teach tool literacy programs at the STEAM Studio of the University of North Carolina in Asheville. 2 years ago, we were granted funds to make our shop more accessible, and we purchased these height adjustable tables as part of this grant. These tables are really lovely because they're robust and they crank up and down so we can make them different heights. And since then, I've been working with a consultant who uses a wheelchair to make our curriculum more universally accessible. These tables are great. They've allowed us to learn so much about what's possible in our studio space and also what's not possible, what our limits are. I'm henceforth going to call these the ironic tables because there's a few problems with these things. The first problem is how much they weigh. They're 173 pounds. And the other design flaw is there's not really a good way for me to pick them up. I'm 5'4". I'm mostly an able-bodied instructor. And when I need to reconfigure my space, I struggle to move these accessible tables. Unrelated to my job, 13 months ago, I had major surgery and I was placed on a 2-month lifting restriction. Following surgery, I was in physical therapy for 8 months where I was relearning how to move my body so that I didn't hurt myself. Meanwhile, back at work, I'm tasked with moving these heavy, awkward tables around to make our space and our curriculum more accessible. But suddenly, I can't do this. To solve this problem, my physical therapist offered me to write an accommodation letter so that I didn't have to move the tables anymore. It was great. In this particular case, I already know how this goes. I'm gonna take this letter, I'm gonna go to HR. HR is gonna present the letter to my boss. We're a staff of 3. My boss is then gonna come back to me and I have to figure out how to make the accommodation for myself. So how to move these tables as part of my job without picking them up. I don't even need the letter to do this. In some situations, that's fine. Letter or not, we can make an accommodation. We can meet an accommodation and it's fine. Sometimes a letter is helpful. If you need an office chair with armrests, for example, maybe you need the letter so that HR can purchase it. If you need an interpreter, if you need more frequent breaks, if you need a job reassignment, if you need noise reduction, right? I could go on and on and on here. The letter can get you there, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's timely. I want to look at a counterexample now. I've had quite a few experiences as a staff and faculty person with student support offices. So I know sort of how this goes for a lot of students. This process isn't always easy and it's not always timely. So when we have a student with an accommodations request, they visit the support office. If the accommodation is reasonable and appropriately supported with a documentation, this is a whole thing, a whole nother thing. The support office then goes to the instructor. There's a lot of privacy laws we're navigating with this, so sometimes the instructor can talk about it and sometimes they can't. We may have to go back and consult with the support office or the student for clarification, again, following the law here. This might prompt the student to go back to the support office and be like, whoa, okay, what am I supposed to tell the professor, et cetera. The support office may also reach out to shop staff. So for example, if this student's in a sculpture class where they're interfacing with shop staff may then have to talk to the student and or the support office to clarify. This might prompt the student and the support office to have another chat. Eventually we get there. A semester is only so long, right? In both of these examples, the office that's responsible for adhering to the Americans with Disability Act is remaining compliant by responding to a request. They're creating a system that has a paper trail and they're staying within the confines of a law. Administrators are also following this system in place, and sometimes they're completely disconnected from what's actually going on in the classroom, what's actually going on in that studio space. Sometimes the administrators that are helping enforce these laws don't have the ability to provide much guidance in specific situations. For example, does an administrator have any advice for accommodating a seated user who needs to use a table saw? Probably not. My point is that these letters can place a lot of pressure on faculty and staff to engineer a solution. We want to help. We're not necessarily trained in ADA compliance or in disability justice. There's a lot of layers here, so I want to take a step back for a moment. So when we think about disability, there's two ways that society can approach this problem of disability. The first avenue is through a medical model of disability. So a person has a difference, and a medical professional is trying to correct that difference by making the person normal, Okay, so this might look like creating a prosthetic leg or an arm. This might look like medicating to correct an attention disorder. A child goes through speech therapy, behavioral therapy, right? We're correcting a difference. We're altering a person so that they can better fit into normal society. And sometimes we can't quite get there. A tool that was designed for use by a standing person might never be able to be used by a seated person, for example. So there's a second way that we can approach this problem of disability, and this is through a social model. In this approach, a person has a difference, and the way that our society or our culture is constructed makes that person disabled. So as a person is disabled because their difference is preventing them from fully participating in social or cultural norms. We see this play out in buildings without elevators, the expectations of a 9-to-5 work week, a presentation given without an ASL interpreter. In this model, the problem is not the person's missing arm. The problem is the doorknob that wasn't designed to meet the needs of all people. So today I'm here to advocate for correcting the doorknob. Let's correct the doorknob, or let's put some wheels on some heavy tables. So I want to back up again. The environment that we inhabit is designed using average measurements. This sort of data is rooted in eugenics, and in modern day, this data is currently being collected by the US military and the automobile safety industry. From there, this data is put into databases that are used by industrial designers, and those industrial designers are then fabricating machines and objects that are generally designed to fit average human bodies. So ultimately, this makes work safer and easier. And I'm really just talking about the entire field of ergonomics. And I want to go on a brief tangent here because in September of 2023, this data was recently used to create the first crash test dummy that was modeled after a female body. And when I read this, the first question I asked was, well, how long have crash test dummies been around? Anyone? 74 years. It took 74 years for designers to use female body measurements to create a safer vehicle for us to drive, for us to ride in. Okay, back to ergonomics. So this data is being used by designers to make objects safer and easier to use. And I want y'all to take inventory right now. In the chairs you're sitting in, are your feet touching the floor? How comfortable is your butt? Where's the chair hitting your back? If you lean forward, can you comfortably put your elbows on the tables? How many people are uncomfortable in these seats? Just curious. I see some yeah, maybe a little bit. Okay, me too. I wasn't comfortable in those seats. So the things that we interact with are designed using statistical averages based on who the designers think are using the objects. So the design industry is determining, do you belong to these objects? Or do you not belong to these objects? I'm gonna back up again. Hi, I'm Amanda. Here are some things you should know about me. I'm a white, queer, gender nonconforming, neurodiverse person who is assigned female at birth. I have sensory sensitivity, and I identified as having a disability. I'm 5'4", I weigh 170 pounds, and when I sit in a standard height chair, my heels don't touch the floor. These things will be important later. In the program that I manage at UNCA, we offer classes in welding, woodworking, and digital tools for kids as young as 8. Okay, small people, also adult learners of all ages and experience levels. I'm obsessed with my body's relationship to the physical world. And over the past decade, I've taught in and I've managed studio spaces for a variety of organizations, from grassroots initiatives to higher ed to K-12 to internationally famous project-based learning giants. In this work, my focus has been on non-traditional students, women, older people, English language learners, neurodiverse people, people with physical differences, trans and non-binary people. And that's not because this field is necessarily flooded with different types of people. This has been because I've specifically sought out these teaching experiences for these audiences. As we all know, but we aren't necessarily all talking enough about, this field of making is dominated by white, able-bodied, upper-class, educated cis men. This domination, in my opinion, stems from a long history of metal and wood craft traditions that are steeped in apprenticeship-based models around education and tool use. So think about blacksmithing, construction, most recently digital tools and their reliance on technology access. Statistically speaking, this problem of diversity, equity, and inclusion in spaces for making, it's a hot button topic that many people are trying to solve from a variety of different angles. And as educators and managers in these spaces, we're always asking, how do we welcome and retain different types of people in spaces designed for making and tool use? So not just women, but queer people, BIPOC people, neurodivergent people, different types of thinkers from disciplines outside of engineering. This is specific to my work. We have a lot of engineers in my space. This is a multifaceted, complex issue of race, class, gender, and access. I'm not going to solve any of it for you today. What I am going to do is give you a different way of approaching this problem. And I'm also going to give you some tools to take home with you. So I want to propose that by examining the ways in which we approach educating third graders, we can create more inclusive spaces for making. Now I'm going to pause. Before I continue, I have to say a few things. One, I'm about to talk about kids using power tools. Two, power tool safety manuals say, do not allow these objects around children. And they don't give much explanation beyond that. So yes, I'm violating the safety manuals by educating folks under the age of 18 on how to use these tools. And that's my job, literally my job to do this. So I want to talk about third graders now. Third graders have a queer relationship to power tools. Power tools that you can purchase here in the United States generally are designed for people who the companies think are going to use their product. So they are taking the body measurements of white people who were assigned male at birth, who are around 5'8", who weigh about 172 pounds, and are definitely able-bodied. So in contrast, the average third grader is about 9 years old. They stand about 4 feet tall. They weigh only 62 pounds. And the safe use of power tools relies on a specific mathematical relationship between your shoulder, your elbow, your wrist, and your hand. It relies on your height relative to the height of the table that you're working at. It relies on your upper body strength related to the tool's weight. And if I'm over 16 inches shorter than the intended user of a tool, every variable in this mathematical relationship changes. How I hold the tool, where my strength comes from, where my leverage comes from, where my eyes are. If I'm 9 years old, the weight of a tool like a jigsaw is at the limit of my safe carrying and lifting ability. This is about 11% of our body weight. This is the adult equivalent of trying to carry 3 jigsaws or 2 gallons of milk with one hand and manipulate it. Gender identity theorists like Judith Butler or Sarah Ahmed have a lot to say on this topic. I could go on and on and on about that facet of this, but of note here today, designed objects are essentially telling the story of who has a correct body and who has an incorrect body. When tools are designed with a specific body in mind, it means that anyone that doesn't fit the specification has to adjust their relationship to the tool. This can make work more complex, more difficult, less safe. This also means that entire categories of bodies are unable to access ease and safety. Under this logic, just like the kids, power tools weren't designed for me to safely use either. I'm a biological woman with a decade of shop management experience. So if tool design is excluding users, makerspace diversity is also an issue of physical design. So if tools that are used in the construction industry are designed for my body, I may be more likely to go into the field of construction or blacksmithing or engineering. This is an issue of access. Teaching tools to third graders means that I'm adjusting the teaching to their body size. So I'm providing accommodations throughout my instructional period with these kids. The work surfaces are shorter. I help push or steer the tool. Work periods are shorter because this is an intense athletic event. This tool is not designed for this body. And in order to teach, we've redesigned the learning environment and restructured the way that we teach. Easy, right? This is easy. We can just easily make some adjustments right now. We can lower the tables. We can give more frequent breaks. I want to take this one step further. I want to complicate this a little bit more. I'm going to talk about neurological differences in educational spaces and also how we can accommodate without needing an accommodation request from a student. There's a lot that we can learn about third graders if we want to make spaces more welcoming in this way. Developmentally speaking, third graders are in a learning transition from pictures to words. And by that, I mean, they already know how to read a lot of words, but they're starting to make another developmental transition. And this is, they're learning to read to understand, read a narrative to understand a sequence, which is one step beyond just recognizing the words on the paper. So they're taking more complicated information in by looking at sequences of words. And third grade education is designed with this milestone in mind. Third grade books have illustrations to assist with providing context clues. Assignments might revolve around spotting the difference between a picture and a word. And while the focus on this grade is on literacy, there's still many visual aids in their environment to assist with this transition. This means that elementary classroom designs are also very conducive to visual learners or people who appreciate patterns. Colors can indicate groupings, symbols accompany words. We might be able to see the thing next to the word that represents the thing. Closed doors and drawers might signal that something is off limits. Well, open bookshelves, open cabinetry invite tactile exploration from the students. And as we transition out of third grade, this sort of blended approach to classroom design is often abandoned. This is partially because people who have graduated third grade are now also supposed to understand certain social conventions. I'm supposed to ask if I can touch something. I'm supposed to remember how to use something after hearing someone describe a process. I'm supposed to hold my body a certain way to demonstrate that I'm paying attention. I'm expected that I should be reading literal signs or instructions before proceeding. Now, if I have a brain that already has to work harder to do these things, learning a new thing on top of that might be more difficult. Learning tools in a shop or a studio space means learning a new vocabulary, new sequences, new ways of moving my body. Verbal instructions, literal labeling systems, and assumed social conventions don't always work for neurodivergent learners, for visual learners, for people learning the English language, for people with anxiety, or just for people inhabiting a space and using tools that weren't designed for them at all. Like a third grade classroom, the shop environment or studio space, in my opinion, should be designed to accommodate for what we're teaching, which is essentially new jargon, new sequences, new social conventions. So then what? In our current approach to disability, we provide accommodations to someone who moves or thinks differently so that they can have equal access to learning material. This system relies on a person who needs accommodations to self-identify and also to have the words to identify what they need. We rely on a system and a process, to be correct, to be just, and to be timely. This is a system that assumes a baseline of normal and also assumes anyone outside of that box has the bravery, the energy to explain to normal people how they're abnormal. But what if we're able to expand this definition of normal? What if we approach the design of classrooms and curriculum in a way that captures more brains and bodies? What if we can do this with just a few small adjustments? I think we can. So, in order to change this system, we have to understand the system that we're working within. This requires y'all to do some homework. So here's your assignment. This is going to look differently depending on what your role is. If you're a staff, if you're faculty, or if you're a student, not every piece of information I'm about to give is going to be applicable to everybody, but it's going to give you a place to start. So I want to start here. This is the data that I was talking about in the beginning. This is a book called The Measure of Man and Woman: Factors in Human Design. This is a great technical resource that was originally published in 1959 and then was revised in 1993 to include women. It contains body schematics for a number of scenarios, data about work table heights, standing, people, sitting people. So if you're in a position to design a space and you want to start with actual data, here's the place to start. 2 more resources. Accessible America is a good resource for understanding how folks with physical disabilities are often excluded from design considerations in buildings and public spaces unless the law mandates it. This will also get you thinking about universal design rather than retrofitting. Visual thinking addresses how folks who are visual learners have become marginalized in higher education. And this was partially due to the implementation of standardized testing in the 1990s. Visual thinkers need learning material delivered differently. And sometimes this can make content in college difficult because it's not always delivered that way. Job Accommodation Network is a great website, askjan.org. This is a searchable database that allows you to search conditions and also search accommodations. So you can type in anything here: anxiety, depression. It'll give you more information about that condition. And if you're an employer or you have student workers, for example, or you have a student that you're working with that has that condition, it'll give you some things to think about, like some accommodations that would be helpful for a person managing that sort of condition. 2 more resources. Unmasking Autism is a great resource for learning about autism in general. Autistic folks do a lot to try to appear normal, and this can lead to not being diagnosed. The unmasking process is the process of undoing that performance of being normal. So if you're curious about this neurological difference and you want to learn more, this is a great place to start. Divergent Minds specifically addresses how work and school isn't made for neurodivergent people and discusses that some accommodations that you could create for yourself or you could create for other people. Using the sort of framework that's mapped out in this book, you could start to redesign educational spaces or even your home to make it more friendly. Self-advocacy in higher education is a resource for students who might have had an individualized education plan or a 504 plan in their K-12 experience. So IEPs and 504 plans are developed by teachers and administrators at your school when you're in elementary, middle school, high school, to support your learning if you have a documented disability. So these plans essentially expire when you turn 18 and when you transition into college. That means for a freshman coming into a college space who might have had a plan in place that maybe they didn't even know about, coming to college then becomes a challenge. This is a really great book that walks you through the process. What are the things that you could request? What's the actual process of talking to the support folks at your college? Universal Design for Learning in the Classroom also has a partner, CAS.org. This is a website that's a fantastic resource. It walks you through how to develop curriculum that's more accessible to a broader student audience. So this means if you have to create a lesson, can you create one that doesn't have to be altered for someone who's learning English, for someone who's neurodivergent, for someone who has a differently abled body? Can you design a lesson or a semester where a student wouldn't necessarily need an accommodation intervention? This is a pretty lofty proposal, but it's interesting, and this gives you a lot of resources to work toward that. Okay, so now what? I gave you a bunch of stuff. Go read it. I want to give you some actual tangible things, tools that you can take home this evening. So that's what this next part is. I'm in a studio management position and also a teaching role, so a lot of this comes from that perspective, but I want you to take what you need, learn more, share it with your friends. So these strategies, I like to split them into 3 different piles. We're going to start with design. Environmental design strategies can be passive instructional supplements. So there are ways that you can cut down on the amount of verbal instruction that you have to give your students. And this lets students feel more empowered and in control of their environment. So can you walk through your classroom or shop and ask yourself, are there ways that you can let the environment be the teacher? The way that something is displayed can convey a sequence of expectations. Where do the safety glasses live? Well, put them on before you come into the shop, take them off when you leave. I don't have to say it because it's right there on the wall. Storage can communicate use. What does this tool do? It makes big holes. How big are the holes? It's all right there. Where do the drills live? This expectation is clearly visible. I don't have to communicate it with you. Student can look at this and gain that information. Visual indicators can also remind students of what's already been instructed. So where does the user stand? In that pink box. What does this object look like? Such self-direction can help with anxiety. This can increase curiosity. This can generate passive knowledge. It can also increase confidence and ownership of a space and over education. Make labels more inclusive. Makerspace people love labels. I got to walk around earlier today into the makerspaces and take pictures of everybody's labeling system. These literal labels aren't always helpful though. If I'm an English language learner, or if I'm dyslexic, or if I'm someone learning new vocabulary, sometimes these labels don't mean anything. For visual learners like me, I might not even see the labels at all. What's in these drawers? I have no idea. So are there ways that you can show as well as say? Can symbols, color coding, and vocabulary exist together? Multiple approaches can reach more people. Maybe there's a way that you can eliminate words altogether and say the same thing. If you're not a graphic designer, or even if you are, the Noun Project is a great resource for finding symbols to supplement your labeling systems. This is a database of symbols that you can download and you can use in signage. It's a collection that's constantly being updated. They work with graphic designers all over the world. They're trying to make a symbol for every noun in the English language. So I just like to go on here sometimes and try to find what words they haven't figured out how to make a symbol for yet. Next one, can we make storage more intentional? When I look at these drawers, I understand them as not for me. Opening these drawers would be a violation of privacy. So social convention has taught me that I need to go bother the shop manager rather than helping myself. This is a power dynamic that isn't always welcoming for nervous or unfamiliar users. So can we invite tactile interaction to signal curiosity and comfort? Open the doors. It's really easy. Display the tools. Inclusively label all of the things that are in those little cubbies. Let's offer some height options for all bodies. All bodies have different needs, and it isn't just a wheelchair user who can benefit from those height adjustable tables. No height adjustable table, that's totally fine. Are there other ways that you can provide options in your space? Can you provide a step stool? Can you mount tools at different heights? If you're a shop manager, walk around your space and I want you to ask, could a seated or short person use your shop without asking for modification? Now ask that about a tall person. So think about also the hallways and the classrooms in your academic buildings. Are all of the walkways at least 3 feet wide? I mean, we can look around here and all of these chairs sort of butt up to each other, right? So that means that no one can pass in between the folks who are seated like this. So can you move things around to create a little bit more space? This would help a wheelchair user. It would work for somebody who has limited mobility. Also, it's just good for everybody. A little more space is good for everybody. Let's talk about instruction next. So I want to return to the Universal Design for Learning and CAS.org. This is a worksheet that's a free resource on their website. You can download it if you're, if you're just curious, if you're designing curriculum, whatever. You can use this rubric to check if your curriculum or your training is more universally accessible. So meaning, are there ways that a student can engage with the content without needing an accommodation or an individual intervention? I want to spend a few more minutes here because I know there's faculty and staff in this room, and I think this can be helpful especially if you've had students in the past that have struggled with particular assignments. This can help you redesign some things. So if we send a curriculum or a lesson through this rubric, here are some questions that we can ask. Are there ways to provide choice and autonomy? Are there multiple ways to both see and hear the information that's being delivered? Can a student participate with their body? Can a beginner and also an expert in the subject participate in a lesson for a sustained period of time? I run into this all the time. We got the really smart kid in the class who gets done with the thing really early, and then we have the other student who's struggling. Can we redesign the lessons so that both are participating for that same amount of time? Have you defined the vocab and also provided a symbol that could sub for the word? Am I engaging my auditory learners, visual learners, kinesthetic learners? Can a student that needs to fidget, needs noise reduction, needs multiple breaks, could go on here, complete this lesson without asking for the accommodation? Can a student comfortably push against boundaries of an assignment if a different format works for their brain? So how do you, the teacher, signal that such boundary pushing is acceptable in your classroom? Have you provided multiple frameworks for goal setting, project management, and task completion? This looks different for everybody. Not every assignment or new system is going to check all these boxes, not at first. The trick is to reassess each time you deliver an assignment. Think about which student you didn't reach. Send the assignment through this rubric again. Is there something that you can change for next time? Like with many things, iteration is the key when you're increasing inclusion. My next instructional tip is to create breaks from noise and don't solely rely on verbal instruction in a noisy room. For folks who have sensory sensitivities, their brains don't filter out unnecessary sensory input. For example, I'm standing here, I can hear the computer fan buzzing, I can hear every time anyone shifts, I can feel the socks on my legs, I can smell the smell in the room, I could go on and on. As someone with sensory processing sensitivity, specifically with sound, if I don't manage this at work, I get fatigued, I get overwhelmed. Think about your students also experiencing this. So this is true for a lot of people, and knowledge of it is becoming more common. So I simply ask, if you're teaching in a noisy environment, can you teach without turning the tool on? Is there a way that you can supplement your teaching with gestures or with silence? I want to stay on noise for a second. Educate your students on noise canceling versus noise reduction earwear and offer some options. So I'm coming from a shop context. We have a bunch of students that use the Bose noise canceling headphones as a way to manage noise sensitivity. That's great. That's great. It's amazingly helpful for tons of people. But noise canceling technology isn't necessarily protecting your ears from loud sounds in a shop context. So these headphones are sending out another sound to cancel out the sound in the background, which actually means that there's more sound bombarding your ears, okay? So instructors, it's your job to offer students options for risk management. So this includes explaining when noise canceling headphones are appropriate and explaining when they should be using another option, and then providing options, because not everybody's head or ear is shaped the same. Something that works for somebody may not work for another person. While we're on the topic, if you order equipment in your studio, get some safety glasses options. They make small safety glasses for children. They actually fit my face better than the standard size safety glasses. I'm not a child. Order some chemistry goggles. Sometimes this is a good option for folks who have like decorative eyewear, right, that are giant that you want to like double up on the protection. So just like the ear options, we want some eye options as well. I started this talk today with data, and I want to end on a similar note. Everyone's making spaces different, and it's important to collect data from your actual and target audiences. As an ambulatory person, there we go, I make a lot of assumptions about the abilities of wheelchair users. I make a lot of assumptions. I think I know the experience, but I don't know the experience. My experience is different from somebody else's experience. And if I'm in charge of designing a space, I need to take into account the experience of the other people in that space. So we hired a consultant who uses a wheelchair to go around and speak openly and honestly about her experience in the studio. Hire a disabled person, pay them for their time. I want to acknowledge that money can sometimes be a barrier, right? Not everybody has the ability to do this, but also data is everywhere. So for a time, I worked at California College of the Arts, and for an entire academic year, I collected a bunch of user data. I didn't know what I was going to do with it, but I just started collecting data. At that school, there's a 40% international student population, and at the time, I was interested in increasing accessibility for the English language learners. One of these data sets that I was collecting was which tools were being borrowed from our shop and taken into the adjacent classroom. From this data, this was surprising to me, I learned that rulers were the #1 tool. It wasn't chisels, it wasn't clamps, it wasn't saws, it was rulers were the #1 tool. And previously they had been stored behind our table saw. So this meant that every time someone wanted to come in and get a ruler, they had to walk behind the table saw to go get the rulers. So during the next summer, we redesigned the layout of our shop, and I moved everything that was a frequently borrowed tool to near the door. This meant that students who were shy or nervous or maybe had a language barrier didn't have to interact with me, the shop manager, to go get a ruler. We didn't have to do that a bunch of times in the day because they could help themselves because it was right there by the door. Had I not collected this data, I wouldn't have known that that was a need in the shop. It revealed itself as a need. So this can take some of the guesswork out of how to better serve your audience. Collect some data about your audience. Gathering data is a means of learning what you need. If you manage or teach in a space, to learn about what is missing or not working is so important. If you teach others, this might mean creating a space for your students to tell you what they need, about how they learn best. If you have a disability or a difference, or you think you do, learn about what has helped other people. In order to change the definition of normal, we need to talk about what we need. As a neurodivergent manager and faculty member, I need timely and clear communication. I need to not be surprised. I need you to know that my feelings don't always match my face. I need you to ask me questions if you want me to talk about myself. I welcome others to meet me by sharing with my employees and also with my students. So the phrase I like to use over and over again with the folks that I manage or work with is, I work best when, and then I give them the info. I ask my students this. I also ask my students and my employees to share this information. How do you work best? Is there anything that I should know to help me teach you better? You don't need an accommodation letter to create this safe space. This is just data collection. Inclusion is a proactive relationship, and I approach it as though I'm meeting my students and they are meeting me for the first time. So we're different people each week. I share my name and my pronouns at the start of every class, and I ask my students to do the same. A lot can happen in a week, y'all. Every single class, I go over expectations and goals. I write them on the board, so what I'm saying matches what they're seeing. We post what the goals of a critique are. I post what questions they're supposed to be answering. I allow students to disclose if they're not in the headspace for receiving verbal feedback. I allow students to write instead of say if they need to. When I'm teaching a workshop, I teach a lot of one-day workshops. At the beginning of the workshop, I acknowledge anxiety and fear. I remind people of where the restrooms are and when it's appropriate to go. We go over etiquette for snacks, water, taking a break, headphones, satisfying sensory needs. I acknowledge that we have different body experiences. So as I'm teaching a tool, what I'm teaching and how I move my body may not work for you. And we just acknowledge that and talk about it at the beginning. It may look differently for you than it does for me, and that's fine. Inclusion acknowledges that difference and it doesn't erase it. We're all working in a system that wasn't designed for us. We're all gonna fail at this sometimes. Leave room for and learn from deviations. I've spent the last year and a half trying to make a stand that holds up a scroll saw and a bandsaw. This seems easy and it's not. This stand needs to make both tools the correct height for Priya, who is seated, and also for my third graders who are standing. It needs to be light enough for me to pick up and load into a van. It also needs to be sturdy enough to not vibrate across the floor when we're using it. This stand has gone through 3 different iterations. I started each version of this design only as a means of gathering data so that I could improve on the design. I want you to remember that the most recent version is never going to be your last version. Even when we're not designing with iteration in mind, users are always giving us data. Everybody look at this frustrating data. Look at this. Why did the person put this back wrong? What wasn't clear here? There's even another clamp to show you as an example, and yet it got put back wrong. I love these moments. This error isn't the fault of the person. This error is the fault in the system. So there's a lot for me to learn about why this clamp got put back wrong. And then how can I redesign the way the clamp is hung so that everybody in my shop feels welcome to return it a particular way? I'm this clamp. Okay, I'm a minority in this field. I'm constantly uncomfortable in shops. I have a queer relationship with tools and also the environment. I often have to adjust my way of being to fit within these spaces. And it's important to remember that not every single user is going to be interested in working hard to make themselves feel comfortable. And every user experience is an opportunity for more data, more improvement. This is actually the heart of diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives, and this is the heart of student retention. So I'm curious, do you feel comfortable in your classroom? Do you think your students do? What do you need to experience belonging? Do you need a lower table, a lighter tool, to know when it's okay to use the bathroom, to know where the drills are stored? Everybody in this room has a crucial role in this journey. So I'm inviting for each of you to share, ask, acknowledge, welcome, and most importantly, redesign. Thank you, Smith College. Do y'all have any questions? Can we know why the clamp was put back? The question was, can we know why the clamp was put back wrong? I'm gonna go back here. I think it's because it could be, right? It's like, it literally could be put on the wall a different way. And if the way that it was being hung was redesigned so that you couldn't put it back a different way, maybe it would have gotten put back the way that was intended. That was a great question. Yeah, back here.
for hiring or trying to hear from people that are from the target audience without them feeling organized? Like, how do you want help, but like without?
Yeah, so this is hard. I'm going to repeat the question for the webinar folks. The question was that, how do you collect data from your target audience without tokenizing that audience? I don't know if I have a really good answer to this, other than inviting people to give their opinions and incentivizing those opinions, right? Because as a queer neurodiverse person, I don't want you to ask me questions just because I'm those two things, but maybe if I'm part of a larger thing and I understand the broader context, I might feel invited to do that. Awesome question. Yeah.
Trying to make something acceptable for the most amount of people as possible when there are like inherently kind of contrasting needs, and like sometimes providing different options isn't always a possibility, and like there's someone who wants it to be louder and there's one who needs it to be quieter, and
Yeah.
someone who wants it to be bigger and one who can't hold a bigger thing, you know, like there's always like that contradiction, and like how do you tackle like that problem, like with like making it accessible for this person is really gonna draw that from other people.
Yeah, so universal design has this catch-22 built into it, where if we're trying to design universally for every single person, that means we have to make a custom thing for every single person, which is impossible, right? In a room that seats 60 people, we absolutely can't do that unless everyone's bringing their own desk with them. Impossible. So I think we can get as close as possible and then see if we can get closer by iterating when we meet something that doesn't work. So that's how I try to approach it at work. We only have 2 height adjustable tables in a 1,200 square foot space. So I move them when I know that I'm going to be teaching folks who may need them, and I make them accessible. And sometimes we don't have enough, and we just have to roll with it. Yeah. Good question, y'all. Yeah.
How do you attract people into like these sorts of programs that naturally attract like cis men or boys? I'm coming from like a high school classroom idea where like a lot of, we have woodworking and welding programs, and they're called like the boys club, and so like how do you like, and then there's like a PhD program that for like preschool education out of high school, and it's like girls, and so like merging, like figuring that out. I don't know.
Yeah, in the past and currently, we do that through targeted marketing. So if we're looking to increase a certain population, we go find places where we can talk to that population. Another way that I've seen work is to do that through the representation of the instructors, right? So if you're in a hiring position where you're able to hire diverse instructors, those diverse instructors are going to attract a more diverse student base. That's all I got. Yeah, good question.
How do you deal with a immediate need for a long-term working solution? Like say you give example of the stand for the saw, and your iterations were evolving, but at the time of say your first one, somebody's needed the saw. How do you deal with that?
In the example of the saw, I found a saw stand that was almost at the right height that I need, like that I could buy, that I could just drop $60 and say, okay, this is done. And now with it being done, that gives me the opportunity to data gather. So I think when you're trying to find an immediate solution to something, find the thing with an educated mindset, right? With data, find the thing that works closest. And then use that to actually assess if you need to change that choice, or if that choice is good enough for now, I think. Yeah.
I was just curious about your opinion or experience regarding how changing the environment or making a space more accessible, how that affects like relationships, discipline. Because in my experience, like teaching preschool, the whole like, environment of yes was really important. And how-
I've worked at that school too. Yeah.
Just like even the furniture in the room, like kind of contributes to how often you say no or how often you're like
Mhm.
expected to like redirect or have a conversation. So I was just curious how, in your experience, how that's affected relationships or like classroom dynamic.
I can say as a manager rolling out changes in higher ed where there's already a precedent, it is so hard. It is so hard. And I've absolutely made the mistake of rolling out changes too quickly when folks are already used to a certain system. So my approach after learning those hard lessons have been incremental change, right? We're going to change all the labels on this side of the room first and let folks get used to it. And then once they're used to it, we'll just go do the other side of the room. So it's always been incremental going forward when I've started rolling these things out. But yeah, it can totally throw off the dynamic. It can make people really upset in ways that you don't anticipate. So slow incremental change, unfortunately.
What tool is the noise threshold where noise canceling headphones would actually use?
That's a really good question that I can't find the answer to. Noise canceling headphone manufacturers haven't yet released data about how much noise they're actually reducing. Yeah, there's one manufacturer who makes actual earmuffs for noise reduction that has Bluetooth enabled like streaming options. And that's really, it's Isotunes is the manufacturer, but that's the only company that has released that data. I can't find it anywhere. I'm very tempted to email Bose. Like in recent days, I've been like, I really want to know this information. I can't find it.
Shop, is there like a specific tool where you see someone using it?
In our shop, generally, folks who are using noise canceling technology aren't in the noisy spaces. We ask them to switch because we can't tell if they're listening to music or if they're just using the cancellation function. So that's a cultural thing where I'm working right now, where we just ask them to switch. Yeah.
We have time for like one more question.
Okay, one more question. 0 more questions. Oh, yeah.
In terms of making your shop space wheelchair accessible, in the process of that, were you starting from a new space that you were like from the ground up, I'm trying to make this wheelchair accessible, or continually breaking things down and being like that?
No, this was an existing space, and I'm going to be totally candid here. Our accessibility office did a walkthrough with us, and they said everything was fine. And I said, that's not true. So we were making small changes in an existing space as much as we could, given that we only were able to get 2 crank up and down tables. Yeah. Yep. Thank you, everybody. This has been delightful.
Thanks so much, Amanda. And thank you all for coming. Have a wonderful evening. And we hope you'll come to our next one, which will be on April 10th. And I'll share information because we got your email address. Thanks so much. Take care.